This week, we welcome Elyse Gunn, CISO at Nasuni, to discuss how to make security a business enabler. In the leadership and communication segment, with CISO stretched thin, re-envisioning enterprise risk may be the only fix, if the article actually had the fix in it. Oh, sorry, we'll get to that. To lead through uncertainty, unlearn your assumptions. Leaders, consider pausing before acting on employee feedback, and more. Business Security Weekly starts now.
This is a Security Weekly production for security professionals by security professionals. Please visit securityweekly.com/subscribe to subscribe to all the shows on our network.
It's the show where we explore the business of security to improve the security of business. Your trusted source for actionable insights on leadership, communication, and innovation. Get ready for Business Security Weekly.
This episode is brought to you by Adaptive Security, the first cybersecurity company backed by OpenAI. AI has fundamentally reshaped the threat landscape. Today, the greatest risk isn't someone breaking into your systems, it's someone breaking into your trust. Deepfake voices joining your video calls. AI-crafted phishing emails that perfectly mimic your executives. Even synthetic job applicants entering through the front door. Adaptive Security is designed to counter these new realities. The company delivers real-time attack simulations that show security teams exactly what modern AI-driven threats look and sound like, and prepares them to respond effectively. Learn more at securityweekly.com/adaptive. Zero trust is clearly the future as threats get faster, quieter, and harder to detect. But implementing it shouldn't disrupt the business. ThreatLocker enforces default denied execution in a way that remains enterprise-ready, scalable, and operationally clean. Unknown software is stopped cold, trusted apps stay contained, and drift is locked down across the environment. It's zero trust that works in real enterprises and prepares you for the threats ahead. See why CISOs are adopting it at securityweekly.com/ThreatLocker. Welcome to Business Security Weekly. This is episode number 436, recorded February 23rd, 2026. I'm your host, Matt Alderman. Welcome, everyone. Joining are my co-hosts for the segment today. First, Mr. Ben Carr. It started to warm up, and now it's getting cold again. Ben, what's going on?
Yeah, it's a little freaky. I don't know what's going on. The weather can't decide here in Texas, but yeah. We'll just work with it. It's a nice day here, though. A little sunny. Like it.
Yeah, exactly. And joining, I think for the first time, Jackie McGuire. Welcome, Jackie.
I think it might be the second, but it's been
it might
long
be the second.
enough that maybe people have forgotten me. And it was 85 in Arizona yesterday, so.
Yeah, you don't have to worry about snowmageddons. Our guest is in a snowstorm right now, so we'll get there in a second. One quick announcement. Security Weekly listeners save $100 on their RSAC 2026 All Access Pass. RSAC 2026 conference will take place March 23rd to the 26th in San Francisco, or a month away. To register using our discount code, please visit securityweekly.com/RSAC26 and use the code 56U5 Sec Weekly. It's so long. I got to shorten that one. We hope to see you there. Jackie, I think you're recording with me this year, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. All the days.
All the days we're going to be together in Broadcast Alley, folks. If you want to find us, we'll be in Broadcast Alley. That's where we'll be most of the week.
I'm
All right.
excited.
Yes, so am I. Elyse Gunn is the Chief Information Security Officer at Nasuni, where she defines and leads the global security and compliance strategy for the Nasuni portfolio of offerings and operations. Elyse has a proven track record of developing and implementing best-in-class product security, AI governance, and regulatory compliance strategies across many industries, including highly regulated financial institutions, healthcare providers, government entities, and medium and large technology organizations. Elyse, welcome to Business Security Weekly.
Thank you, Matt. Happy to be here with all of you.
Yeah, welcome. Yes, it's going to be a fun discussion. This is a conversation we talk a lot about on this show, is how do we get security out of the perception of being a cost center and actually a profit center or a business enablement center that allows us to kind of justify some of the things we do on the security side?
Absolutely. It's a real problem, honestly, because historically, it's been nothing but a cost center, and anyone who's led a security program has been told to do what you got to do, but do it as cheap as possible. And really, security isn't a cost center. It hasn't been for a very long time. It's the function that lets the business move fast without breaking trust. And so when we stop looking at security as overhead that needs to be funded, and see it instead as growth infrastructure, it gets funded like the strategy driver that it really is. And really, that's how I try to lead all my conversations, whether it's at the board of directors with my own internal collaborators or anywhere else.
You said something really interesting. We're gonna double click on it. Trust, right? That sometimes is a hard thing to build between the security team and the rest of the business. So let's talk a little bit about how do we establish that trust such that we can put ourselves in that strategic position?
That's a great question, and it's the biggest challenge I think that anyone stepping into a new role in a new organization starts to face, is winning the trust of their internal collaborators. And something that has always helped me is you get pushback often when you're trying to implement, guardrails or controls that this will inhibit innovation. It's going to slow us down. We can't, produce profits, launch new products, whatever it may be, as quickly if we do what you say you want us to do. But really, what reduces innovation is uncertainty, and security reduces uncertainty. When you can build predictable, scalable processes that protect the business and support the business all at once, uncertainty and that fear of uncertainty is reduced, and people can innovate at scale.
So I was listening to a podcast the other day about personal relationships and kind of how to rekindle the spark in your relationship. And one of the things it was talking about was that overcoming challenges together or building things together is actually one of the best ways to kind of maintain and invest in the connection between two people romantically, friendship-wise. And I think that kind of applies to business as well, right? I think one of the places you see friction is when you wait until the end of a process. And then you try to bring two groups together and say, well, the security team says this, so we have to do this. Do you find that bringing those two teams together earlier in the process and helping them build things together so that they're both kind of equally invested can help solve some of that problem, rather than waiting until both parties have an outcome in mind and then they clash at the end?
Absolutely. I mean, I think what you've just described is the core concept in shift left threat modeling. When you bake security in early on into every stage of the process and not try to bolt it on at the end and throw it out the door, everyone is happier, and most notably your consumer base, because it is a more secure, better operating product or service or whatever it may be. And so really, if security is a bottleneck at your organization, then that is a design flaw. The security program was not implemented appropriately and with business support and business operations in mind. And we need to go back to the drawing board and understand how can we both achieve what we need to in the best and most efficient way possible.
So what do you see as tips to help do that, right? So when I look at an organization where a CISO comes in and either they've had kind of a little bit of a dysfunctional program, or maybe they haven't had a CISO before, and security comes in and starts to implement, guardrails, it's most often perceived by there'll be a couple individuals in the organization at the C-level that I like to say maybe tend to run with scissors, right? And marketing sales comes to mind. And so, you go in partnership to try to say, hey, we need to kind of approach this in a little bit different way. But it's often perceived as that blocker, right? Because you're changing the existing free-for-all that happened before the arrival and the implementation of a decent security program, even if you're approaching it in the right way. How do you build that trust?
Well, it's a cultural shift, I think what you've just described in a lot of ways, and so finding your security champions can really go a long way. You're not going to win everyone over, but if you can win over someone that they trust, and then they can start to sow the seeds of the value of what you're doing, I think that really goes a long way. And then just, the benefit of always engaging and leaning in with curiosity. What are you trying to achieve and how can I help you achieve it? And just starting there, and making it very clear that You're not here to bottleneck the progress or to stop them from doing what they want to do. You're here to make it as frictionless as possible. And if every project requires an executive escalation, that's not governance. That's not innovation. Yeah, exactly. And so, we read so many articles, TED Talks, that you see it everywhere. Security is the Department of No. We've got to stop being the Department of No. And so really lean into that. Become the Department of How. How can I do this for you? Talk to me. Have an open door policy or virtual open door policy. Get in with the real drivers of change in the organization and make them your friends.
Yeah, I wonder if you see the same thing that I see a lot of people who come into the role, right, of the CISO, and they're used to being maybe, I hate to say manager, but sometimes a manager promoted into that role, right, or a director, right? And even if you're kind of a senior director, you've been doing it for a little while, a lot of people are used to kind of going to their supervisor and saying, hey, I've got this problem. I need you to solve it for me, right? But when you are elevated to that level, to C-level, you don't go to the CEO and say, hey, I need you to solve this problem for me. He's expecting you to solve the problems for him, right? And so it's that partnership and engagement. And I love that concept of like find other people who you can gain trust with and have them be your advocates in the rest of the organization. Yeah. And so that kind of like, how can you be a force multiplier for the other areas of the organization as opposed to being perceived as that blocker?
Yeah, security is a team sport. It's a shared responsibility. I could have the biggest team, the most headcount in the world, but we still couldn't be everywhere all the time. Yep. And so it's really sowing that cultural understanding of what we do, or why we do what we do, rather, and how it's ultimately, hopefully, to benefit as many of our colleagues as possible.
So you can't solve the entire holistic program necessarily. You got to kind of bite the elephant one bite at a time, right? Like eat the elephant one bite at a time. Where can you make gains early? Like because again, you got to build trust. You're trying to put these new processes in place. You can't do the whole thing because it's probably too much to take on. Are there very specific areas where you can start to gain some traction, gain some trust, start to put these processes in place to build momentum to then go tackle the rest of the security program?
Definitely. If you're stepping into a new organization or a new role, find out what the pain points are of your biggest players, but then just kind of on a more generic, level, what can you do to accelerate the deal cycle? Trust and security is major for every consumer, every client, every customer. If you can tie your KPIs, your outcomes, your ROI to that deal cycle, you are winning already in the eyes of your CEO, your board, your sales leaders, your chief legal officer. I mean, literally everyone in the organization, who is a decision maker. Similarly, how can you reduce customer hesitation? That is all tied to the same thing, that trust and transparency. What can you do? And I'm sure there's plenty of quick wins everywhere where you can make those things a little bit easier. And then lastly, how can you prevent disruptive events? Because again, downtime is lost revenue. All of these things are dollars and cents that your executives understand, your sales leaders, your board, whatever it may be. And so when you start to change your language from technical to financial, you're really going to start to see a lot of support. CISOs have to speak 3 languages these days: technical, operational, and financial, probably a whole host of others. But you've really got to be a business leader and understand, what does the business need? Even if I step in and I see these 20 technical changes that make my security heart race at night when I think about them, are they going to buy me the goodwill I need to then go make some maybe more disruptive changes down the line that will be a little harder to swallow?
I think there's something to be said for shadowing. I was at the doctor a couple weeks ago, and they had somebody who was in medical school, and they were in a completely different discipline, but shadowing with my doctor, because when you're in medical school, they want you to kind of, no matter what your specialty is, see what every different kind of medicine looks like, so that you start to understand kind of sometimes the conflicts that happen between them. And I've carried that into one of my roles where, even though I was doing something that was more strategy related, I was like, let me sit through your SE boot camp. I want to actually see what your sales engineers are learning. I want to see what they're doing. I want to see the technology they use every day. Because I think it's one thing to, when you take on a new C-level role or strategy role, to ask people, what their pain points are, but it's another thing to sit there quietly and actually just watch them work, watch the tools they use, watch the processes they go through. I think you learn a lot from that, and it's a lot to take a couple days out of your week and do that. But early on in a role, when you're really trying to get your feet under you, I think that buys you a lot of goodwill. And instead of asking somebody, just passively observing, I think you learn a lot more in terms of kind of the unseen friction that sometimes causes issues between groups.
That's such a great point. I totally agree. And I think what you just described also would earn you that trust too. Wow, this partner really wants to know what I'm doing and how I'm doing it. They're not just here to tell me what I can and can't do. They want to know what are my goals and how do I achieve them every day. So I think it really helps to just sow that trust even deeper.
Unfortunately, Jason's not here because he would have loved the conversation about tying yourself to revenue, because that's exactly what he does, right? But that changes a little bit about how you have to think about the role a little bit, though, doesn't it? Because you've got to be a little more outward facing, right? To work with the sales team, to work with customers, to kind of build that trust. Because if you're doing that and helping the deal cycle and the revenue side of this, it changes your purview a little bit, right? You said, I have to speak 3 languages, technical, operational, and financial. You also have to have the skill set to be an internal and an external communicator, don't you?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And external in every way, your customer and consumer base, probably the biggest audience. But, regulators as well, media too, if you were to be thrust into the media for some reason, hopefully good reasons, hopefully none of the bad reasons. But you're absolutely right. It is a new skill set beyond technical operator, financial translator, being able to meet your audience where they are, to start to intuit and infer what are their concerns, especially if they won't say them outright. And how you can help them feel better about them too. So maybe it's part, emotional support CISO in a lot of ways too.
I think it's really helpful. Where if you've seen the same thing, if you don't naturally gravitate towards that, right? So if you're if you're not used to being in an outbound role and communicating externally with, say, customers, right? Okay. That's an area where you can lean in and actually go to the sales leader and say, hey, look, I'm not really comfortable with this, but it's an area I'd like to expand in. Can you help me, right? Uh-huh. And so I think that shared exposure of I'm exposing where I have foibles or issues or concerns can ingratiate you to that leader and kind of make a connection where maybe before, you were he was concerned about exposing areas in his, purview that he might have as deficiencies. And so I think that shared experience can bring a lot to the table in those cases. So lean into that. The marketing stuff, right? If you're not comfortable speaking in front of an audience, lean in with the marketing person, right? Like figure out who are the leaders that you need to leverage to round out your professional career as well.
Yeah, absolutely. We can't be everything all the time. And that vulnerability is really foundational to relationship building.
Now, Ben, they could just listen to the show because we do talk a lot about leadership and communication in the second segment. I'm just saying, right?
So true.
But it is. It's such an important part of the skill set, right? And this is where I've seen the biggest, I think, transitional struggle for traditional technical CISOs is the ability to make that transition into that more public-facing, confident kind of speaker that then allows this whole transition from cost center to business enabler actually work, right? It's a skill set change.
Yeah, absolutely. If you've got to be able to tie your program to the 3 R's, revenue, resilience, and regulatory confidence, and of course, customer confidence above all else too. And if you can't do that, you're going to struggle for executive alignment, customer alignment, internal collaborator alignment, you name it. And so you've really got to embrace and be vulnerable with yourself and your others and others around you if any of that is a weakness for you, and find a way to strengthen it. I think the biggest asset I've identified moving into more senior leadership is knowing that it's not life-ending to say, hey, I don't actually know I don't know, but I'll find out for you, or that's not my strong suit, but I'm going to invest there. People appreciate that. No one expects someone to be everything and know everything and excel everywhere. And so to humble yourself and to be vulnerable can really go a long way in front of all of these audiences.
Yeah, anyways, yesterday's homily was all about humility, right? Humble yourself, right? It does solve for a lot of ill wills. Anyways, it just brought that back from yesterday. But it's true, right? Sometimes you have to humble yourself if you don't know the answer. Elyse, let's take an example just quickly, right? We see this rise in AI and everybody wanting to use AI. As a CISO, as a leader, how have you tried to address the concerns with AI, but also allow the business to try to figure out how to leverage it to innovate? I'd love to understand how you've approached this topic, knowing that we're trying to take security away move it from no and friction, et cetera, into this enablement innovation. How have you approached some of these issues like AI?
AI is incredible in many ways, and it's revolutionary in many ways, but the way that we govern it at its core does not really shift from the way we've governed most of our tech stack from the very beginning of this. When we first started the migration to the cloud, it was just as terrifying. And oh no, my data is going to go sit outside of these four walls. There's no way that's going to work. And yet we've made it work. AI is alarming in a lot of ways, but I find that if we root ourselves in security fundamentals, that's how we're going to get through it. But just at obviously a very different and larger scale. So that's third-party risk management for any AI provider you bring in-house and all that goes along with that, access controls, least privilege, audit logging, treating agents like the NHIs that they are and governing them appropriately. And so, and just really rooting it in a strong governance framework. NIST has a wonderful risk management framework if you're building AI systems internally. And the inverse of that AI trust is on the customer side. And I have found that the fastest way to lose trust with AI when it comes to your customers is vagueness. And so the inverse being the fastest way to build trust is that clarity. They're going to ask you, so be prepared to answer. Are you training on my data? How is it retained? Who has access? How do you monitor abuse? Think about what you would ask any of your vendors and be prepared to answer it for your own consumer base. So AI is wonderful, revolutionary, but how we secure it, again, I think it's just really back to the basics in a lot of ways, but at a 2026 scale.
Yeah. I see it today too, Elyse, right? Like we're getting questions from our clients about how we're using AI, what we're doing with the data, how we're protecting the data. Are we using their data to train, right? And to your point, if you don't have a good answer for that, that potentially slows down business revenue. It slows down deals, right? Which is kind of how we've been talking about this segment is we got to remove that uncertainty and that friction out of the process because we don't want to slow down the deal pipeline because then we're right back where we were, right?
Absolutely. It's the kiss of death for a security team.
Yeah. Well, in a business too. Like it's not just the security team, it's the whole business. But if security is the one slowing it down, then yes.
Exactly. Right.
Internally, you become the scapegoat. Yeah.
Absolutely. That's where we see a lot of growth in these more modern trust centers too. You can really be very transparent with your consumer base about what you're doing and how you're doing it. And, you feel the benefits internally too. I heard a quote the other day that the Trust Center has turned the 200-question security questionnaire into a hyperlink, which is much more manageable for our teams, that's for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I did see a lot of that kind of movement over the last year plus, right, of this concept of the Trust Center and building this out where you can kind of go get the answers. I think it's a great idea. And I've seen some movement, but I still see some lack, like friction there. Like there's still some organizations out there that don't want to be that open about what they're doing, which kind of befuddles me, right? Like if you're trying to build trust with your customer base,
wouldn't you make it really easy for them to get the data they're looking for to speed up business? So even though I've seen great progress, I still see a lot of challenges there. I don't know if you see it as well, but that's just something I've seen over the last year or so.
Absolutely. I mean, at the end of the day, we could put as much as we want on a trust center, but if a 6-figure, 7-figure client comes knocking and demands more, they're going to get it, you know, and we're going to find a way to make that possible. The trust centers are a fascinating kind of case study in that balance of security versus kind of checklist compliance. They have this, and this. They say they do this, rubber stamp, approved, on to the next vendor. And so it's how much are we gaining trust and enabling the customer to self-serve versus just kind of continuing the life cycle of that checklist kind of risk management approach, which doesn't do anyone any favors.
Yeah. It also balances that transparency and confidentiality line as well.
Yes. An ever difficult struggle for our team. Yeah, that's for sure.
I think it removes a lot of friction in general, but I totally agree with you. Like we are stymied by the fact that it is a lot of checkmarks compliance, right? Do you have your SOC 2? Yes. Well, have you read it and have you verified? Have you actually checked it? Like it's like but that checkbox of like you have the SOC 2, like everybody think that's the golden mark. But I know a bunch of organizations that they have their SOC 2, but I wouldn't trust them.
Oh, I don't know anybody who reads them. I've responded to so many breaches where it's a third-party vendor that got breached, and you're like, does that vendor have a SOC 2? Yes. Mm-hmm. And you read it, and you're like, it literally says right here they're not doing that. You know that, right? And they're like, wait, what? You're like, why do you even ask for them if you don't read them?
It's performative, right?
It's what I like to call...
You put stuff into the security scanner, it comes out the other side. Somebody asks a couple questions about what's in the bag, and you're like, yeah, it's fine. Move on, get on the plane. Like, it doesn't really solve the problem, right? Like, this third-party risk thing is just out there. We just kind of figure out a way to pass it on by without too many questions.
I think it's really become a CYA activity in a lot of ways, so that if and when someone's vendor is compromised, they can say, well, we reviewed them.
So from a trust center perspective, I see it as a way for a vendor to basically put all the information out there to not slow down the process of the sale, right? Remove as much friction as you can from the third party. And then some organizations will ask further questions or more in depth, and you'll have to answer them. You can't put everything in the trust center, but put as much out there to remove that friction of like, it's almost like, we know you have to ask. Mm-hmm. We know we have to get these regulatory guidelines. We'll all play the kabuki theater and then move on with real world, right?
It does feel like security theater in a lot of cases, for sure. So we'll see where it takes us.
I think there's some great innovation. I think AI can actually do some really interesting things, like actually read the SOC 2 and tell you what controls are in it and whether they're met or not. Like some of the stuff we're doing could actually make the process a little easier, right? Because it's still a huge burden for everyone on both sides of the TPRM use case, right? Companies
then we just
and
have
the
to
vendors.
deal with the outbound hallucinations. That's all, Matt. It'll all work perfectly.
As long as it hallucinates in the right direction, we're good, Ben. Elyse, thank you so much for joining us on Business Security Weekly.
Thank you. It was wonderful to chat with you all.
Right now, with Tanium, IT and security teams complete patching programs in minutes, not weeks. Reduce software vulnerabilities by up to 97%. Cut incident response times by up to 99%. This is not just IT, this is autonomous IT. Making business, your business, unstoppable. Tanium, autonomous IT, unstoppable business. See more at securityweekly.com/Tanium. Ever feel like your network infrastructure is stuck in the past? Meet Meter, the company reimagining what it means to get and stay online. Meter delivers full-stack networking, wired, wireless, and cellular, all in one seamless, scalable, and secure solution. From hardware design and firmware to software deployment and support, Meter streamlines every part of your network while giving you all the control and transparency you need. Whether you're managing a branch office, retail stores, or a massive data center, Meter gives you performance, reliability, and the visibility you need to stay in control. Thanks to Meter for sponsoring. Go to securityweekly.com/Meter to book a demo now. That's securityweekly.com/meter, METER. All right. Before we get into this week's articles, one quick announcement. Most security conferences talk about threats. Zero Trust World lets you attack them. From March 4th to 6th, 2026, in Orlando, Florida, this hands-on cybersecurity event features live hacking labs where you'll break real environments, think like an adversary, and learn how attacks really work. You'll also get expert sessions, real-world case studies, CPE credits, and networking with top practitioners. And yes, the Security Weekly team will be there too. At least some of us. I won't be there. Don't miss it. Register today at securityweekly.com/ZTW. I know Adrian's going because I'm covering Enterprise Security Weekly for him. Are you going too, Jackie?
I'm going too. I'm really excited. Last year was awesome. This year's party theme is space, and I have a whole astronaut thing. So
awesome. They invited me to go, but there's so much with my day job that I just couldn't commit to go down. I'd love to go down because the folks that put it on, Threat Locker, they're great sponsors, and I would love to go. I just couldn't. So it actually worked out because now I can cover ESW for Adrian next week while he's down there having fun with you.
Yeah. We'll think about you while we're sweating
thanks.
our butts off in the Florida humidity.
Yeah. Plus, I gave up liquor for Lent. I gave up alcohol for Lent. So I would be boring anyways.
I don't drink and I'm not boring.
I know. You're not boring, but I'm more, I think I'm more fun sometimes when I've had one or two.
Anyways. I've heard a lot of people say that about you, Matt.
I know.
Like, have you met sober Matt? Not for me.
He's just like your dog. He's an asshole.
Yeah.
No. All right. Let's get into the articles. So first article, and some of this is tied to the previous segment, right? Because we were talking about business enablement and the security teams, et cetera. And a lot of the articles we cover in this segment are really aligned around enablement from a security business perspective with security and communication and leadership skills, all those things we just kind of talked about. This one is interesting, why cybersecurity is becoming a board level priority for startups in 2026. What should be a board level priority for all companies in 2026. But let's put that aside for a second. I'm in a startup, right? So is this an important component for me? Yes. Why? Because if I'm not thinking about security and I don't have a good security program and I'm not doing my SOC 2 and I'm not addressing all the questions we get about AI, I'm going to struggle to grow. And if I struggle to grow, guess what? I'm going to struggle to raise money and make my investors happy and continue to grow the business. So to me, this makes perfect sense. What say the two of you?
Well, I buy that theory. I don't buy the practical implication of this. Like, I don't actually see this manifesting, and I'd love to be wrong on this, but I just don't see many startups actually pivoting and say, look, we have to make a real concerted effort to be secure from a cyber perspective. I hear them saying, how am I going to maximize ARR? How am I going to make sure that I keep headcount the right size, that I'm not spending too much? How am I going to focus on driving revenue? That's what I hear them saying. And it's hard to fault them, right? Like, from a startup perspective, your driver is to grow as quickly as possible and get the valuation up there for the investors, right? That is what it is. But I think, look, we've talked about this before, and Jackie, I'm interested in how you see it. Like, I do think like there's a missed opportunity on this being a competitive advantage. I just don't see people keying on that. And I haven't seen the company that I've been like, wow, they're really leaning in hard. And I, as a large enterprise customer, want to do business with them because, right? Like, and that's, unless that starts happening, where do we go?
Yeah, and I think this goes back to, so my background before I got into cybersecurity was finance. And so I think this goes back to what we were just talking about with your ability to tie what you're doing in security to revenue without, and I think it also goes to you have to speak to different people with different languages. And when I'm talking to people in security, one of the things I always use is like, okay, don't say operational risk. Nobody knows what operational risk is outside of security. Say, had we been non-operational for the last 24 hours, the revenue cost would have been this. And like, I think your ability to kind of quantify security from multiple different perspectives, given who your audience is and what they actually care about, is what matters the most. Like, you can say 5 nines, but if the person you're talking to doesn't understand what 5 nines of availability are, it doesn't matter to them. But yeah, I think it can absolutely be a competitive advantage. And I think you can point to any number of companies that have been doing all of the right things except security, and then a security issue pops up and they literally go bankrupt because of it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
one of the things that Shamla Naidu, was at Netscope, she's written a handful of books, and one of the things she talked about is that when she's on boards, she finds that because she's the security person, like anything that comes up technology-wise, everybody just turns and looks at her and expects her to know everything there is to know about security. And so it should be a board level issue, but it's also on whomever on your board really understands security to make it everybody else on the board's problem as well and explain it to them.
That's the pivot point. Like the challenges, and we've talked about this before, and I'm a big advocate, like we need more security people on boards with board representation be asking these questions. Because, and this is where I was going to go with your thought process, I buy off on it. But the challenge is, like, if you think of a startup, you've got founders and a small team that are kind of growing this thing, right? And they're going to hire marketing, they're going to hire sales, they're going to hire the things that they think they need to grow, right? And you've got the investors that are looking at a different set of criteria and kind of measuring against that and then offering kind of advice and pushing them in certain directions, right? I don't see anybody who's part of that conversation who's saying, you know what, we need a security guy here, right?
Yeah.
Unless they've had an issue or they've seen somebody in the space that's had an issue, right? And then it may come up, but it doesn't come up as a focus point because they're dealing with all their effort on growing the business. We need people who are sitting at the board level or who are part of the VC side of the house who are asking that question and being like, look, we have a big potential risk problem here. If we don't have security as part of this conversation, and how do we build it out? Let's scale it appropriately, but what are we doing here? I don't see those questions being asked, and that's the challenge. Isn't it? It happens at larger companies too. If you look at the constituent of who's on cyber from a board perspective of larger orgs, it isn't very many, and what you end up is exactly what you said. Typically, it's like a tech person, a CIO, right? Or something who's elevated, and they just get asked all the security questions, and I think they bluff their way through sometimes because they're like, well, I got to have some answer, and I'm sitting on the board. For me, that's the challenge, is like we just don't have the representation asking the questions and being part of the conversation.
Yeah, and I think so we just did Security Money, last week or whatever it was. We pre-recorded it. If I think about the types of security companies that are coming online right now. Now, this may not tie into the broader startup community, but think about where investment's going. It's going into AI security-based companies that are starting up. Based on what I'm seeing, lots of questions around AI security, data security, and how that's being done. If you're an AI security startup company and you're not thinking about how to handle the security questions that are coming, how are you going to be effective selling your product into the market, right? And that's where I think this potentially ties together, Ben, is if you're using these technologies and you don't have the right answers on the security side, you're not going to hit the revenue numbers. And therefore, somebody's going to start going, wait, why aren't we selling this thing? Well, it's because we don't have our act together on how we're securing all this new fancy AI technology we just embedded into our product, right? Like, I could see that as a huge
thing. And so this is one of the fastest things when I consult for, and I do a lot of go-to-market consulting for security companies. The reason that a lot of people don't want to deal with the security is because of psychology. It's because it's a negative thing. And and all you have to do to fix that is reframe it. reframe it from, oh, we need to plan to fail to no, we need to plan to succeed. Like, hey, we're driving a Ford Taurus right now. And if we succeed, we're going to need an F1 car. And so what we need to do is put processes in place that we can scale from a Ford Taurus to an F1 car while we're driving without crashing. And so if you can reframe security from being this negative, reactive, necessary thing to being this very proactive, like, hey, we are going to put the most bulletproof systems in place so that we can succeed as hard as possible, as fast as possible, and grow as we succeed. Like, there's so much nuance and psychology that's involved in security that I think people lose it. And I think people kind of lose the positive story you can tell about planning to succeed. And so I think if you start messaging it not as, hey, we need these security things because we're going to get hacked and then we're screwed, to, hey, we need to put security in place so that we're not trying to write these rules and put these things in place as we're growing really, really fast. We can do it right now, and we know we can build these to scale with us. And I think that's like, security is, you have to take people from reactive to proactive.
We talk about it as a cost center, but it's not the cost center.
It's a revenue enabler.
It's perceived as a negative. It's perceived as a detractor, right? It takes away from in many ways. And that's really not what we are. We are a positive, but like, how do you reframe it that way so it can be seen that way by the rest of the org?
Yeah, and it's really is like hey, security is one of those things that if you get it right, you do it early, and then you can just follow the procedures you put in place. Will there be things that come up that we have to respond to? Yes. But what we're going to do is lay the tracks so that this business can grow as fast as possible, efficiently, without having to redo this policy over and over. And I think that's one of the difficult things in security, is that you're most successful when nothing happens. And that is not, it's not like sales where you're like, I closed a big deal. It's literally the best day is when you come home and you're like, nothing hit the fan today. And so you have to take people from feeling reactive to feeling proactive. And I think it's just all messaging and all the like, hey, if we want to do this, if we're going to, build this rocket and take it to the moon for the first time, what we have to do is make sure that all of the policies are in place now so that we're not trying to plan as we're growing exponentially. And I think if you can frame it that way, usually it's a lot easier to get people to buy into than the, oh, we didn't do this, so now we have to do, you just have to make it put people in the driver's seat, basically.
Put people in the driver's seat of an F1 car, by the way.
Well, yeah, I mean,
it only has one seat.
I raced motorcycles, so of a Hayabusa, however you want to message that, it's literally because it's a different. So when we're talking about security buying, right, the thing that I emphasize to people is hey, a lot of security is reactive, and that is a really crappy feeling, and that you're just kind of reacting and swatting down things as they come up. If you want people to buy more of your security product, make them feel more proactive and less reactive. So take them from, that's why the most effective security messaging for products all starts with proactive verbs, because we all want to believe we're proactive hackers out there. It's all detect, investigate,
when
hunt,
security is
respond.
exciting, very bad things are happening.
And so if you make people feel like they're making proactive decisions, not just containing the fallout of bad things, I think they make better decisions, because the feeling that you associate with a decision is based on two things: the feeling at the peak and the feeling at the end. And so you have to create those experiences if you want people to associate a positive feeling with something. And there's a lot. First degree was psych, right? Then I did economics and finance. So there's a lot that you can do to create a peak experience for somebody in a security process, and then a really happy experience at the end so that they feel good about it. If you just let things play out the way they play out, you're not really controlling how people feel about it. And the more positive, if you go back after you complete a process in security that's not necessarily fun, but then you create a point to celebrate. They're hey, we took this from this to this. This was really awesome, and this is why. You have to create those feelings because they don't naturally happen in security. That's not something that...
That's it. That's another good say easy, do hard, Matt, is make people feel good about security.
Right. Make people feel good about security. Proactively feel good about security. All right, article number 2. With CISO stretched thin, re-envisioning enterprise risk may be the only fix. I don't necessarily disagree, by the way. However, I didn't see the fix in here.
Yeah, well, what's the it seemed like their fix at the very end was get a bunch more people in roles and titles to do pieces of this. And that doesn't make sense to me. It breaks down very quickly. I just don't see it. Like hire a bunch more people to fulfill activities that the CEO does or that the CRO does, or I mean, it just
right. Here's where I thought it was going to go. I thought it was going to go down the lines of what Jackie was talking about earlier around quantifying our security risks and in understanding the financial impact, right? Like when I think about enterprise risk and I think about security, we need to do a better job of articulating what the potential financial impact is, because the business understands the financial side of this, right? And so if I can do that effectively, I can go in and say, look, here's the potential impact to us from a risk perspective, whether it's, you know, from a resiliency perspective or whatever, right? That's where I thought this article was going to go, but it doesn't cover any of that. It's just like, hey, just break up the role into multiple people and you'll be fine. And I don't think that's the fix.
Yeah. As a research analyst, I tried to bring finance into this. So I spent 15 years on Wall Street, right? And they teach you in finance, there's only 3 ways to manage risk, literally. Like you can avoid it by not doing anything. You can reduce it by doing something in a smart and efficient way, or you can transfer it by insuring against it or having a third party do it, hiring a service provider. And so
you could also accept it, by the way, and accept
but that's what comes out at the end of that process. So you go through avoid, reduce, transfer, and then anything that you haven't done one of those 3 things to becomes accepted risk. And so it's one thing to say to your CEO, like, hey, we really need better endpoint detection, or we really need better, network detection. But it's a whole different thing to say, here are the risks we have. Here's how we're avoiding them, reducing them. Here's how we're transferring them. And by the way, our cyber risk insurance doesn't cover X, Y, and Z. So right now, this is accepted risk. And then you ask the CEO, what do you want to do about this? Do you want to just accept this risk, or can I have a little bit more budget to do some of the avoid and reduce part because we can't transfer? And I think those are much different conversations. I also think a hell of a lot more people should be using MSPs and MSSPs than are. But that's just my opinion. Like I'm a big fan of transferring risk. I'm a big fan of having someone else to sue if something goes wrong.
Yeah, Ben, you and I have talked about this before, right? Yes, you can outsource portions of the risk, but you still own it, though.
Yeah, you still have that. Look, so if you're XYZ company and I use PDQ MSSP and I get breached, I can sue them, but like I still have like customer impact. I've still got regulatory issues. Like I still have a bunch of stuff, right? So there's a fine line between actually like transferring the work and transferring the risk.
Yeah.
Yes.
No, and I mean, I'm being somewhat facetious, but
I know, yeah.
I do think the crazy thing is that we did this research survey and it showed that the smaller a company is, the more likely they are to think they should handle their security themselves.
Yes, that doesn't make sense.
That makes no sense.
It's completely backwards.
Do not have a reverse malware engineer on staff if you're a 100-person company.
Yeah, if you've got 6 people in your entire security group, the chances that you're covering everything 24/7 are pretty freaking low. And if most of your adversaries that aren't in the U.S. live in the opposite time zone, unless you've got somebody working third shift, I think there are a lot more ways to transfer risk than most companies explore. And so, they're working with these small teams and they're trying to do the best that they can. But the reality is and this is the other thing where I think you need to flip the psychology, because I think for a lot of CISOs, they feel like bringing in a service provider is admitting defeat, or somehow admitting that you can't do it, you can't do your job, when realistically your job is to know which things you should be outsourcing and making the most of the internal talent that you have. And I mean, I agree with some of this. And this is where I think having overlays is really important. You should have an overlay between your security team and your IT team. You need to have someone who's a designated overlay between security and sales. Like you need to have people who are liaisons between security and the other functions, because then you build the goodwill and the bridges to actually understand what people's problems are before they're submitting a ticket about them.
Yeah,
And
I'm a huge believer in that, Jackie. Like security, we call them security champions, right? Usually that's what I've called them before. And having that person like is an embed, like where they're actually, their full-time job is in that role. It's in sales, it's in marketing, it's in finance, right? But they're aligned back and they report into like a BSO and they're connected back. So they understand all the minutia of the process, which the security guy is never going to do, but they're connected to bring those security risks and concerns back. And if you treat them well, I mean, it can be a great facilitation between orgs.
yeah, and the other way too, make one of your security people go to a trade show and see what it's like to set up all those Mac minis and see what it's like when your EDR all of a sudden stops you from connecting to the network at the trade show and see
Feel
like,
the pain. Yeah, you got to feel the pain.
yeah. Well, and I think the problem though is that a lot of times people don't go through and specifically designate those people and carve out the number of hours you want those people doing those things per month. And if you just assume that people are going to take on extra responsibility or do these roles or interface with other groups without making it either something you're actually measuring them on from a performance standpoint or something you've designated like, hey, 3 hours a month, we want you doing this. Like very few people proactively take on responsibility outside their job. And so that's like the resource planning aspect of this is usually where I see things go awry, where, a security leader's like, well, it makes sense to me that somebody would do that. Well, yeah, that's great. But if you didn't actually tell somebody to do that and they have a full-time job, they're probably not going to proactively be like, you know what, I think I'll work 48 hours this week.
That's it? Only 48? Next article on leading teams to lead through uncertainty, unlearn your assumptions. So this one took me a while to wrap my head around because unlearning seems like wrong to me, but maybe it's unlearning old habits and assumptions that allow you to figure out better and new ways to do this. I still struggled with this one a little bit. I didn't know if you guys had a chance to read through it.
Yeah, the way I took it was like the bias you bring into something, right? Like your preconceived notions and trying to Jackie's point about like, when you're working with another team, you have to feel their pain. You have to understand like what issues they're actually going through to understand how to come out the other side with a solution to the problem. I mean, that's kind of what I took from it at a high level.
Got it. All right, let's go to the next one. The blind spot every CISO must see, loyalty. Ben, do you agree?
I think the assumption that loyalty exists, I think that's a challenge, right? I think we make that assumption a lot, right? I've seen that where the company assumes that there's loyalty from the individual, but the individual gets no loyalty back from the company. And that's a challenge, right? I mean, I think loyalty is a two-way street. You have to get loyalty to give loyalty.
I think the insinuation that people are loyal to companies in general is just stupid. Like people are not loyal to entities. They may be loyal to individuals. So they may have a manager or director who they feel very loyal, but like nobody... I think very few people, I shouldn't say nobody, like I'm not like, oh man, I feel so loyal to this company. Like it just doesn't exist. Like
it's a misuse of loyalty, right? Like loyalty is a perception that like you want the person to do well. Like, look, I think generally a lot of people want the organization to do well because they're paying their salary, right? At the end of the day. But if they stop paying the salary, that loyalty will go away really quickly. And it doesn't exist in the same way. The relationship isn't the same as it was, 50 years ago with companies. And I think even then loyalty is something like you said, you've got a great boss you work for, or you've got a great employee who you have a lot of loyalty to because they're your ride or die kind of employee. And you bring them along from place to place because, you know that they will outperform for you. And so that loyalty it's based upon a person, not based upon an entity.
Yeah. Like I can feel invested in a company, but I'm certainly not going to be loyal to them, especially not as an at-will employee. And that's like the entire structure and legality around employment in the United States is not set up to create any amount of loyalty. Like we can all be fired anytime for no reason. And so how loyal do you feel to any company when legally that's your reality? So you can make people feel invested. You can build trust to some extent by being transparent and, being honest with people. But yeah, the whole concept of loyalty is kind of stupid to me anyway, but maybe that's because I'm really autistic.
There was this dip in the end of the article towards AI, right, where they talk about parallels to AI poisoning. And I thought I had an interesting I just sat back and thought, like, is the perception that, like, because we pivot to AI, that AI is going to be more loyal to the company because it's not dealing with personality? And I think if you go down that road, you're sorely mistaken. Like, there is no loyalty there. And like you don't have an understanding of why the AI in many cases is doing what it's doing. And if your perception is because it's loyal to the organization, I think you will really find out you're way down a bad path with that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, and like loyalty is a strong feeling of support or allegiance. And the reality is that may not be the healthiest thing in the world, because if your company's really screwing up, your best employees are the ones that are going to be like, hey, we're really screwing up, not the ones that are like, I love this company and anything they say, I'm going to do it as hard as I can. Like,
keep running the stock down.
Yeah, like I don't want sycophants. And it's like, I don't want that in my friends either. And I always tell people, like, my love language is accountability. It's not loyalty. It's accountability. I want
Jackie,
to drive you to be accountable. I want you to drive me to be accountable. Like, I don't want you to just go along with any stupid life decision I make because we're friends. That's not healthy.
Not healthy. This next article, I actually enjoyed this one. Stop Shrinking, the leadership lesson I learned on a Zurich sidewalk. This is a great little story, right? He was kind of, cowering and looking down and not very confident, and was getting pushed around on the sidewalk. And he decided, wait, I'm gonna change my presence. And he stood up and squared up and looked up, and people treated him completely differently. I agree. Project some confidence here. It just was a really interesting, because we talk a lot about communication, but there's also the body language side of this a little bit, right? Every once in a while I'll bring in Vanessa Van Edwards articles into here because she talks a lot about body language and some of the other communication, more of the silent communication aspects of this. And if you're slouched over in a corner, with your eyes down, you're not going to be viewed the same as somebody, a little more upright and paying attention in a room. So I thought this was a good article.
Yep, I liked it.
You learn a lot if you go to music festivals or really crowded shows. I got real sharp elbows and I take up space. So you start trying to encroach on my dance space and you're going to catch one.
You're going to catch one. Yes. I think my daughter resembles that, Jackie.
Yes. That's why we get along so well.
Yes, that is so true. All right. Last article finally rendered. It was rendering it through a 500 error earlier today. It looks like the article is back now on HBR. This is around listening skills. And this one is leaders consider pausing before acting on employee feedback. Again, kind of those communication skills. When the article wasn't rendering, I found a link on LinkedIn about it because I was like, wait, I got to remember what was in the article because I'd read it on Friday. And the summary is a new study finds that when leaders change their behavior too quickly, employees see them as less authentic. Therefore, if you're constantly, adjusting quickly and changing to that feedback, they don't see you as authentic and sticking kind of to your original kind of values and et cetera, right? And so that's why it's saying, hey, take a pause, think about it, process it before you do something about it. And it's a good little tip. It's a really good tip when you're doing almost anything. Pauses force people to kind of refocus, right? If you're doing public speaking, pauses are actually pretty good sometimes to get people to go, wait, stopped talking. Was I supposed to pay attention to something? And so kind of doing the same thing when it comes to taking actions actually is also a really interesting way to do it.
I'm a big fan of the OODA loop: observe, orient, decide and then act, right? I do think it's important if somebody gives you feedback and you decide not to do anything, it's important to close the loop. It's important to go back to them and be like, hey, I absolutely heard your feedback. Here's how I'm moving forward, and this is why. But yeah, I think that you should have strong opinions that are loosely held, and you should explain to people why you have or have not done, acted on their feedback. But yeah, I think blowing whichever way that the wind is blowing is probably not the best way to instill confidence in leadership.
Yeah,
Definitely not. Yes, definitely not. Jackie, thank you for joining me today. Ben, always a pleasure. Thank you everyone for watching and listening. We'll see you next week on Business Security Weekly.